I never thought I'd have to use my position as a district attorney to bring down someone in my own neighborhood. But when that HOA president tied my disabled daughter's hands together and called her useless, she crossed a line that no parent, let alone one who prosecutes criminals for a living, could ever forgive. Before you watch full story, comment down your country name. I would love to hear from you. My daughter Lily is 13. She has cerebral palsy that affects her left side, making her movements a bit different than other kids her age. But anyone who knows her will tell you she's brilliant, funny, and more determined than most adults I work with. She never lets her disability define her, even when others try to. We moved into Pine Ridge Estates 6 months ago. The house was perfect. Single-story, wide doorways for when Lily occasionally needs her wheelchair on bad days, and a backyard where she could practice her physical therapy exercises. The school district had excellent special education resources, and my new position at the county prosecutor's office was just 15 minutes away. It seemed ideal. The homeowners association seemed strict from the paperwork, but that didn't worry me. We keep our home tidy, follow rules, and I've always believed in being a good neighbor. I've prosecuted enough neighborhood disputes to know how ugly things can get when people don't respect boundaries. Little did I know that the HOA president, Deborah Hamilton, considered herself the supreme ruler of Pine Ridge Estates, and that her definition of an acceptable neighbor didn't include families like mine. The trouble started small. Disapproving glances when Lily would practice walking on our front sidewalk. Anonymous complaints about the specialized swing we installed in the backyard, fully within HOA guidelines. I checked twice. Notes left on our door about Lily's adaptive bicycle being unsightly when parked on our own porch. I addressed each issue politely but firmly, citing the exact HOA rules and, when necessary, disability accommodation laws. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. It was a Saturday afternoon in June when everything changed. I was inside preparing lunch while watching through the window as Lily worked on her garden patch, her newest passion project. She'd saved her allowance for weeks to buy seeds and small tools she could manage with her stronger right hand, and her face lit up each time a new sprout appeared. That's when I saw Deborah march across our lawn, clipboard in hand, designer sunglasses perched on her nose. I grabbed my phone to record, a habit from years in legal work, and headed for the door. But before I could get there, I heard Lily's voice, polite but confused. "Hello, Mrs. Hamilton. Can I help you with something?" "You certainly can," Deborah snapped. "This garden is a violation. Unapproved landscaping modifications." Through the window, I saw Lily's face fall, but she responded just as we'd practiced when dealing with difficult people. "I'm sorry to hear that. My dad and I checked the HOA rules before starting. It's within the allowed space and we're only growing approved plants." "That's not the point," Deborah said, her voice rising. "It looks messy. This is a premium neighborhood, not some community garden for people like you." I was at the door now, blood boiling, but held back for a moment. Lily was holding her own. "People like me?" Lily asked softly. "Disabled people who can't even do proper gardening. Look at this, uneven rows, mismatched plants. You're just making a mess because you can't do it right." What happened next will forever be burned into my memory. Deborah grabbed Lily's gardening gloves, special adaptive ones that helped her grip tools with her weaker hand, and yanked them off. Then, in a moment of cruelty that still haunts my nightmares, she took the garden twine from Lily's supply basket. "Let me show you what happens to people who don't follow the rules," she hissed, and before my daughter could react, Deborah had grabbed both of Lily's wrists. With quick, angry movements, she wrapped the twine around my daughter's hands, binding them together. Lily's weaker left hand was twisted at an awkward angle that I knew would be painful for her. "There," Deborah said with a sick satisfaction. "Now you can't make any more messes. It's better this way. You're useless at gardening anyway. Useless just like." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. But the damage was done. Lily's eyes were filled with tears, her bound hands trembling as she tried to free herself. "Mr. Mitchell," Deborah's tone changed instantly, sugary sweet. "I was just explaining to your daughter about the HOA landscaping guidelines." I walked slowly toward them, phone still recording. 20 years as a prosecutor has taught me to control my temper, to speak calmly even when facing the worst of humanity. But I'd never felt rage like this before. "Deborah," I said quietly, kneeling beside Lily to untie her hands. "You have exactly 5 seconds to get off my property before I have you arrested for assault and battery on a minor with a disability." Her face paled. That was just, she wasn't following the rules." "For seconds," I said, helping Lily to her feet, noting the red marks where the twine had dug into her skin. Deborah backed away, stammering excuses, but I wasn't listening. I was focused on my daughter, on her trembling lip, on the way she cradled her left hand, which was already showing signs of swelling from being bound at a bad angle. "Dad," Lily whispered after Deborah had fled. "My hand really hurts." Those 4 words broke something in me. Not just as a father, but as someone sworn to uphold the law and protect the vulnerable. "We're going to the emergency room," I told her. "And then Deborah Hamilton is going to learn exactly who she just messed with." At the hospital, the doctor confirmed what I'd feared. Deborah's actions had aggravated Lily's condition, causing a sprain to her already weakened left wrist. The medical report documented the injury, along with the marks from the twine. The doctor, appalled by what had happened, agreed to testify if needed. I took photographs of Lily's injuries. I had the video evidence of the assault. And I had 20 years of experience putting criminals behind bars. That night, after settling Lily with her wrist wrapped in pain medication on board, I made 3 phone calls. To the police department to file a formal assault report, to my most ruthless civil attorney friend, and to the state's Disability Rights Commission. By morning, Deborah Hamilton was in handcuffs, being led from her pristine colonial home as neighbors watched in shock. The charges were serious: assault on a minor, battery, unlawful restraint, aggravated assault on a person with a disability, a felony in our state, and civil rights violations. The responding officers, friends of mine from years of courthouse work, made sure to walk her right past our house so Lily could see justice beginning to unfold. The HOA board called an emergency meeting that evening and voted unanimously to remove Deborah from her position. But I wasn't satisfied with just that. My investigation uncovered 7 other families who had moved away in the past year due to Deborah's discriminatory practices, 2 with disabled children, an elderly couple who needed access ramps, and several racial minority families who had been subjected to special inspections. I compiled all the evidence and presented it to the district attorney's office. Though I recused myself from personally prosecuting the case due to the obvious conflict of interest, I made sure my colleagues understood exactly what kind of person they were dealing with. The criminal case proceeded quickly. With the video evidence, medical reports, and testimonies from other victims, Deborah's attorney advised her to take a plea deal. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, 3 years of probation, a mandatory community service at a center for disabled children, completion of an anger management program, a restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 feet of Lily or our home, full restitution for Lily's medical expenses. But the criminal case was just the beginning. Our civil lawsuit for emotional distress, discrimination, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act resulted in a substantial settlement. Deborah was forced to sell her house to pay the damages. The judge also ordered her to make a public apology to Lily and all the other families she had harassed. The most satisfying moment came at the community meeting where Deborah, looking humbled in clothes that weren't her usual designer brands, had to stand before the neighborhood and admit what she had done. "I tied Lily Mitchell's hands together because of her disability," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I called her useless. I discriminated against her and other residents because they were different. What I did was cruel, illegal, and inexcusable." 3 months later, when Deborah was released from jail, she found that her reputation was in tatters. No HOA would accept her as a resident, let alone as a board member. Her social circle had abandoned her. The real estate company where she'd worked as a luxury property specialist had fired her. The considerable fine she paid went directly to establishing a foundation for inclusive community housing, named in Lily's honor. As for us, life changed in unexpected ways. Lily's garden not only thrived but expanded. The new HOA leadership asked her to design an accessible community garden where residents of all abilities could participate. Her story made local headlines, then national ones. She was invited to speak at schools about standing up to bullies and at city councils about the importance of inclusive community policies. I shifted my focus at the DA's office to create a civil rights division specializing in disability discrimination and housing violations. The cases poured in, showing how many people had suffered in silence, afraid to speak up. Last week, as we were tending her now thriving garden together, Lily asked me a question that stopped me in my tracks. "Dad, do you think Mrs. Hamilton learned her lesson?" I set down my trowel and thought carefully before answering. "I believe she's learning it every day," I said honestly. "Every time she applies for a job and has to explain her criminal record. Every time she tries to buy a home and faces the same discrimination she once inflicted on others. But the most important thing is what we learned." "What's that?" Lily asked, expertly turning soil with her now-recovered left hand. That standing up against injustice isn't just my job in the courtroom. It's what we all have to do when we see someone being treated unfairly. And you, my brave girl, taught me that more than 20 years of being a prosecutor ever did. She smiled, a confident, radiant smile that showed no trace of the traumatized child whose hands had been bound by a bully just a year ago. That's why I'm going to be a lawyer, she said decisively. To help other kids who don't have a dad like you. I fought back tears as I watched her return to her planting, her left hand working steadily alongside her right, creating something beautiful from soil that had once been the scene of cruelty. Deborah Hamilton thought she was punishing a disabled girl who couldn't fight back. She never realized she was awakening a warrior, and her district attorney father, who would not only fight back but change an entire community in the process. That's the thing about trying to tie someone down because of their differences. Sometimes you end up launching them forward instead. Sometimes your cruelty becomes the very thing that ignites their purpose. Sometimes you pick the wrong girl with the wrong father, and you end up exactly where Deborah is now, facing the consequences of your actions and watching from the sidelines as those you tried to diminish rise stronger than ever before. That's not just justice. That's poetry. 2 years have passed since what we now call the garden incident. Lily is 15, taller and more confident. The red marks from the twine have long faded, but the memory remains, not as a trauma, but as the catalyst for extraordinary change. Our lawsuit against Deborah set legal precedent in our state for HOA discrimination cases. The Lily Mitchell Act was passed last year, creating stricter penalties for harassment based on disability and mandating accessibility training for all housing authorities. Deborah completed her jail time and probation, but her life was forever altered. Last I heard, she works at a center for disabled adults, not by choice but because it was the only place that would hire her with her criminal record. Some of the staff there tell me she's slowly changing, learning empathy through daily interaction with the people she once looked down on. As for Lily, she's become an advocate and change maker. Her garden project has expanded to 15 neighborhoods across the county. She's featured in a documentary about young people with disabilities breaking barriers. And she's already receiving interest letters from top law schools, impressed by her activism and public speaking. Sometimes I look at my daughter, this unstoppable force who refuses to be defined by limitations others try to place on her, and I think about how Deborah Hamilton thought she could break her spirit by tying her hands. Instead, she set her free. Sometimes the most important cases aren't the ones with the biggest headlines or the longest sentences. Sometimes they're the ones that teach us what we're fighting for, and who we're becoming in the process. Deborah learned that the hard way. And every day as I watch my daughter bloom like the flowers she tends so lovingly, I'm grateful for the lesson she taught us all. That true justice isn't just about punishment, it's about transformation. That's a verdict I'm proud to stand behind.